Hello and welcome to Nerdicky. For Nerds by Nerds, I'm Nerdicus Dave, and today I'm hanging out with Heinz. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. Like I said, it's Friday, Friday.
It
It's
is Friday.
in September in the fall in Chicago. So pumpkin spice lattes are back. Halloween is around the corner, and it is finally has that beautiful fall weather.
Yeah, I had to run my wife someplace this morning, and I was actually kind of happy because my tire pressure gauge came on because the temperature dropped so much. I was because I hate the heat.
No, I am. I can't stand it. I'm a freaking professional vampire anyway. The
Yeah.
day star, it burns the flesh. I love fall and actually winter. So I'm happy for the darkness to descend upon us.
Bring it on. So, with that, before we jump in and really get started, how about you introduce yourself to people that might not be familiar with you?
Right. So I'm Rick Heinz. I write sarcastic shit about the end of the world. My primary series is the Seventh Age series. It's novels about what happens when we bring magic crashing back into our world. I used to write for Geek and Sundry for years. I was the primary writer of GM Tips, the entire 3 year long blog series, and doing other press coverage for Geek and Sundry. And then I've been a freelance game writer and writing director for some projects like the Red Opera, Last Stage of the Warlock, and Siren's Battle of the Bards. And most recently, the Crow cinematic adventure.
Nice. So, how did you end up, working on The Crow? Were you a fan already? Um, Tell
Oh,
us about that journey.
I, uh, I, I have never yeeted myself at a property so fast when I saw that it was announced that it was going to be a thing than The Crow. I
Yeah.
am that goth kid who totally grew up in the 90s, from The Crow, right? I read the graphic novels, I read some of the novels. I've seen the first movie that was great. I've seen the other movies that maybe had good soundtracks and weren't so great. But I still was a very, very avid fan of the first Crow comic, and the first Crow movie, and all of the supplemental comics and a few of the novels as well. And so, even back in early, oh geez, I wouldn't say early, back in 2018, I got a chance to sign my novels like near a table next to James O'Barr, and I'm sitting there like fanboying out the whole weekend long, and like run back home, get my original Crow novels, finally build up the courage to ask him to sign my novels that I've had with me for 20 years. So Facebook and Skynet and the internet conglomerate that tracks every one of the bits of your data wisened up to the fact that I might just be a tiny, tiny bit fan of The Crow.
Yeah.
And they had an ad that realized that The Crow RPG, in timing with the new movie that's coming out, um, was launched on Kickstarter and successfully funded. And, my first thought was like, oh my God, no, wait, yes, this is awesome, but also this could be terrifying. This could go horribly wrong or be cool. How do you even do this? Right? My
Yeah.
brain kind of went into overdrive. And I went and I did some research on the project. I found out it was this company called Evil Geniuses, and they have revived the modern D20 system, to, because D&D is 5e is arguably more fantasy focused. And so they've brought on a bunch of pretty amazing designers and other writers to overhaul this old modern D20 system for current fantasy day play, whether it be urban fantasy, Highlander, Pacific Rim, all of these cinematic adventures, and they had the licenses for them. And I was like, okay, what does this mean? And I, threw my name into the hat and was like, guys, I am the guy. I am the one you want to write The Crow. Please let me write on The Crow. And at first it was kind of funny because they weren't familiar with my work because I never really helmed a project with Paizo or Wizards of the Coast. My writing was always sort of in the, White Wolf, Shadowrun, off to the side, big giant third party, projects. And so I submitted the Red Opera to them, and they liked it, and they asked me to turn in a pitch. And then what was really cool was they're like, your pitch is going to go up to the studio. And I was like, well, aren't you the studio? And they were like, no, no, your pitch is going to go up to the studio, Pressman Films and James O'Barr, and it's going to be signed off by those guys. Um, and like they're actually very involved in the project. They are with all of ours. We really want to create this cinematic adventure and experience. And at that point, like I was just like I was so freaking happy, and I wrote up my pitch and my idea to how you do a Crow RPG, which we talk about later. And then that's it. They 3 days later, the studio came back and said, "How would you like to write the adventure?" Their designer, Chris Ramsley, he handles all the rule set for like the playable classes and what you do that ties into modern D20, and I take over the actual full campaign that you play for the entire Crow RPG.
So how do you take a property like The Crow? Because all right, so like I'm a fan, but like I'm a filthy casual, right? Like watched the movie, it was good. Bummer, Brandon Lee dies, so it's not the same when you lose the original actor. But how do you take a property like that that's like about a guy, right? And
Right.
something that happened to them and turn that into an RPG, which is generally played amongst a group of people.
That was the first. That was like the first thing I was sitting back. My game designer mode was in
Mm.
complete overdrive of like, how do you do this? Not to give too much away, um, but the concept in this is that you can have multiple reborn. If I got to write an original story set within the Crow universe to tie a lot of these properties together. They have, all the movies were considered canon. The Crow comics, a few of the novels as well, and to acknowledge that in the world of the Crow, if you ever like expanded beyond the movie, these events of tragedies have happened before. People have come back before in, other parts of the world. And they're always like these one shot, two shot stories. But, even going back all the way to World War II, there was a story, set back in Detroit called The Crow Carre. That was a chilling graphic novel. Um, but there's a bunch out there, right? And so I was like, what if as players, as my idea is that you give players the ability to create their own tragedies, what happened to them individually, and then something happens after they've all been given a chance to come back from the dead to right their own wrong, but then something's going to happen in the adventure to tie everybody together and create a campaign that either serves both to start an adventure or as the climax of an entire Crow campaign. It actually is kind of cool. I spent a lot of time like writing this like kind of cool adventure campaign that can be done both ways. But it ties everybody together, and you can have multiple reborn. You could have people play soothsayers. You could have there's a few different classes that Chris has come up with,
Yeah.
and rather than even have just sort of one aspect to come back with, there are a lot of spirits of death in a lot of different ways, sort of in the universe as well. That like different things and representations. So there's a little diversity as well in what you can actually play.
Please tell me the adventuring party is called a murder now.
It needs to be. um,
Especially if they're all reborn.
right. I mean, but so there's the Crow expanded universe had a fair bit of stuff, in the comics and the novels deal with these spirits of vengeance in pretty incredible ways. Skull Cowboy, literally in the comics at one point, he was cut from the movies, tells Draven that hey, if you veer off your path, you'll be cursed to wander this earth sort of forever. And there's some like supplemental comments and supplemental novel lore that kind of hints the idea that like, myths and legends about vampires or werewolves and shape changers and stuff kind of came about in the Crow world from these people that had strayed from their path of vengeance, and chose not to actually like finish their
Yeah.
quest.
So you came to this particular project a little bit later. Had you seen the Kickstarter at all?
No, I didn't. Well, I caught it at the tail end.
Mm.
Like I think right at the end was when Facebook decided to target my ads, and that's when they had announced that they have the cinematic season pass, and then they were going to go out and get uh, amazing writers to work on it, and then seeing the writers that they have to work on these other IPs, I'm like, when Ray Sosby signs on to write Pacific Rim, I am a massive Legend of the Five Rings fan who
Yeah.
enjoyed, uh, the Crane and Scorpion novels and stuff like that as well. And I was like, oh my god, I love your work. And so that kind of it's been kind of fun because in the writers' room, there's a bunch of mutual people just fanning out over each other's work when
Yeah.
we dive into it. But I did come into it late. I'm actually fully finished now. I to say that I was whatever project I was working on, which happened to be my third novel at the time. Um, I had just finished one massive RPG, and I was working my third novel. This project came in. I put everything to the side, and it my summer just flowed, and I love
Yeah.
it.
So
You
you
know,
did your part already. That was I feel like that
yeah,
Kickstarter just happened yesterday.
it did
It's
it. Well, I mean, I also didn't. We also didn't want. I asked not to announce it until the storyline and the final draft were approved by the studio.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
Um, I kind of wanted to wait until I had, sort of the blessing of the higher powers.
Yeah.
And they really liked it, and so I can't wait. It comes out in like I believe it comes out in January or February. And I absolutely can't wait for players to try this because I've taken a lot of inspiration from Wraith the Oblivion, Ten Candles, Dredd in my like sort of method of storytelling. Even though it's a 5e system, I still want players to really experience that like sense of we have control over our fate, and oh my god, this story has multiple choice endings. Like, it is not railroad at all.
Did you find it difficult working this IP into the 5e mechanics?
No. And that's because the modern D20 system allows for more more variety, right? So rather than just, here's a box of hit points, they
Mm.
have like fun rules for that are easy to use that are like, oh, you critically hit somebody, an arm is getting blown off, things like that. People's hit points don't scale up in the system to the same degree that they do in D20. The level cap's actually only like, I think it's like level 10,
Okay.
and in their playtest. And that's because there's a point sort of fun. Like if you want to play Escape from New York, right? That's going to have one type of action feel, and you need, you know, goons and guns and all these explosions and stuff. And with the Crow, it's a very subtle, fainted magic element that kind of exists. And the Reborn are very strong in the sense that yeah, they regenerate, they're immortal, they come back from the dead. Um, but designing those classes, I didn't do the design on them. Chris Ramsley did. He's the co-author of the first part, because he's the main tire in and the main system designer for the Modern Gods main core book. And so Chris already had a lot of the mechanics already there. I just got to take them and be like, okay, here's how we assemble this world.
Nice. So now you've kind of like checked off a main IP you would want to work on, or is there anything else you're interested in?
In terms of working on,
Yeah.
oh god, I'm opening up our own studio called Storytellers Forge Studios, where we are going to do the Black Ballad, which is new album by the band Dia Morte, and a whole new campaign centered around Our Adventure Begins Where Yours Ends, a cleric focused D&D book that is all about what you run when your party has been TPK'd. And we're very excited to start working on that. We're actually just kind of doing it ourselves in house with our own studio. But I have a few properties that I am like working on writing to bring to life. There are a few licenses that I'm chasing myself. I'm hoping to get them. I like anime a lot, so things that deal with vampires and anime, and I think would make fun RPGs for people. But it's very difficult to deal and make through that Japanese process, but I'm working
Yeah.
on it. Um, and then I have to keep writing my novel series. I have a lot of things that I'm working on now. Like from where I started, I think last time I was on the channel was like, oh yeah, I've got a book out, and I've written for Geek and Sundry, once. Now it's like I have like 6 projects that are in the fire. Um, and some of them I can talk about. Like, the idea that I'm doing a whole seventh age Dredd horror scenarios, a political horror, right? Because nobody wrote for Dredd scenarios. And other ones I can't talk about yet, but um, missiles and giant robots and vampires and anime are very fun things.
Do you have a particular system that you would prefer to use when you're working on these projects?
I I like evocative systems. I do like Powered by the Apocalypse. Actually, I like 10 Candles and Shadow of the Demon Lord um, systems. 5e is okay to me. Like I can work with it and make it do whatever I want, but that's because
Yeah.
I'm not on so much the mechanics side, right? I'm the storyline world builder, game designer in the aspect of how do you tie this stuff together. And so I actually find fun in taking here is a rule set that somebody has created, and here's how we're going to make this thing like sing and purr throughout a storyline. Like, how do we make this fun? So I think that every game system has a strength and a style and a suit of play. And you lean into that. But if you want to tell a story that caters to another game system, use that game system.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. Like, so many times people are like, "How do you do this particular thing with 5e D&D?" And generally, my response is why, because there's you know in many cases there's already a game that does that. I'm like, why not just use that game? It was
Right.
designed for it, right? And D&D is really good at doing D&D. Like, I forget who it was, but they said like to them D&D is its own genre and trope, and I have to 100% agree.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it comes down to, D&D offers and D&D style systems in any capacity all offer linear level
Yeah,
progression, right? But like systems that are more in that sort of like the Vampire Masquerade or Eclipse phase or whatnot that are more skill focused are more horizontal and character driven, where you get your experience and you choose which pips on your sheet to level up. And I think that foundational difference between the two almost like can help predict where your storyline and your campaign could fall.
yeah. Like one of the things we were asked when we were making our game, they're like, "Are you gonna do a 5e version of this?" And though we might at some point, but initially, it's like, nah, I just don't hate myself that much to rebuild all of this and basically rewrite a 5e system where there's just so many other systems that work so much better.
Yeah, there's 5e's got its advantages. I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
I like it. I will, I write for it. Um, but I don't know, I like certain cinematic elements or certain more impactful character moments. But I'm also the person who will write into a storyline. Hey, write a letter home to somebody that you love, and when your character dies, the storyteller takes this letter out, reads it, and burns it. So
Yeah.
I very much like that immersion. Like like I said, 10 Candles and Dread are my favorite systems, and they're simple, but they make for really compelling one-shot game sessions. And if you want to add them to your campaign, you can just take them and put them in whatever rule set you want. And
I have not played either of those yet. I did talk to the designer for 10 Candles, and when I was at D&D in the castle, Elise Teg was running a game of that in the chapel at the castle, so that was like super cool. Also,
oh yeah.
also probably pretty dangerous too because it's pretty drafty up there. So,
No, I've done 10 Candles at Bryn Mawr castle as well for a big full immersion LARP, Dragon Thrones, and there's just something
Yeah,
awesome about that kind of night and haunting at 2 o'clock in the morning.
yeah, for sure. Um, so you, you had mentioned that you also have written a couple novels, three. I know I've read at least one of them, and I really enjoyed it. It was very good, and I can contest that you are really into vampires, um, as far as I can tell. What are for people that are not familiar with those works?
So, yeah, the actual official pitch, as it were, that I have to do at conventions all of the time, is that the Seventh Age series is based on the idea that the Illuminati, the Masons, and a bunch of secret societies have had magic forever. And what happens in Chicago when some anarchists level the playing field and give that shit to everybody in the world? You can control minds, make yourself immortal. All you have to do is summon a demon, kill it, and eat its heart, which is bound to go over well when everybody in the world tries it.
Hmm.
Nothing can go wrong. So, thus, a sarcastic series about the end of the world as we bring magic crashing back on top of us, for better or worse. And I know you read my first book, which is more like how do we get magic back. My
Yeah.
second one, Dystopia, is magic is returned and companies brand it, because if Amazon could grind up a unicorn and sell it to people, they totally would.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
and
How do you
like
take magic and use it in a capitalistic hellscape? That's funny.
so I actually had a blast with that novel. I got
Mhm.
to write commercials in front of every chapter about like weird like magic products.
Okay,
And
I'm gonna
the
make myself read this. This sounds fantastic. It also is
uh
giving me some RoboCop vibes.
yeah, I loved RoboCop. But so like what was funny is I was writing it almost in the middle of the pandemic, right?
Hmm.
And I at one point was like, I can't believe I'm supposed to be writing, fiction. But when everybody's freaking, because I'm all I'm do I spent days researching like pharmaceutical ads and copy ads and like whatnot of like those like side effects that, oh, this thing will do this for you,
Yeah,
but you're gonna die of a heart attack in 6 days.
yeah,
And so like to spin those as parodies of like, yeah, you could go ahead and take this like form of coffee that's ground up fairy dust, but we're not responsible for any side effects. Please sign on the dotted line. All these horrible things are going to happen to you. And I made it in such a way that the commercials in the novel have their own storyline of like they're actually different companies competing throughout the book as well. And but I was writing these commercials, and then like the world blew up with everything, and I'm sitting back at home, and we're all just like watching the streams, and it's like, okay, this has gotten really dark. And my novel published in July of 2020, and it was the second book that people started reading that were like, holy crap, this is really good, we like this. And that's when I actually found a literary agent and was able to start going to do conventions once things opened back up. But it was book two for me that started gaining traction. And book three, it actually officially launches next year. Um, but that's Seventh Age Decay, and that one's about bringing. If we brought magic back and we've commoditized magic, why don't we just dabble around with a few myths, cryptids, and gods? So still working on the pitch for that one because it's still in the works, as it were.
So, is it the same cast of characters throughout the series?
No, well, yes and no. Um, One of my things is I like reading series that are complete, right? If I'm going to sit down to read a book series, I like to binge read, right? And as a writer, I found that I had to contend with a very real problem that it can take 12 months, 18 months to get a book all the way through publishing. So how do you do this? So I try to write my novels as standalone tales, but
Yeah,
the world still progresses. So the world evolves, and you'll see the same characters, but the story of what happens in that book can be read by itself. Like you could read book two and you're supposed to be able to read book three without having read book one, but if you want to know, like if you read book three and you want to know how we got magic back in, well, then you go back and you read book one. Most people are still going to start book one, book two, book three to follow the progression.
Yeah.
in the world, but I do try to keep them as standalones. It will
Yeah,
be a 5-book series.
that publication schedule, I think that's why Butcher used to write two different series at the same time. And that,
Oh, yes.
for a while he was doing, he was doing the Dresden Files and he was doing the Codex of Alara, and like so he would put out, so he was putting out a book like every 6 months.
Yeah, they would love it. If I could go back in time, I would have written all 3 books, first, behind the scenes,
Yeah.
and then already had, like, a manuscript started for book 4 and then went to publishing. Um
Yeah, but that's super tricky and also risky, you know, as a writer, right? Like,
Right.
because you don't know if book one's going to get published, let alone book three.
Sure, sure, and that's true. I guess I could, like, hindsight looks back to me and I could be like, "Oh, I can go do this thing this way." But
Yeah.
really, I mean, my schedule is I tend to do, like, here's a book, here's a massive RPG campaign, here's a book,
Uh,
here's a massive RPG campaign. And I have written some short stories in it, that are also
uh,
coming out. I got invited to write on a cyberpunk anthology with, Mike Pondsmith and Dan Wells and a bunch of other, like, famous New York Times bestselling authors on cyberpunk. Um, and I have a lot of writing things that I'm working on, and it would be nice to eventually make that, like, transition threshold where it's like,
yeah.
hi, I'm just doing writing now. Like, I could do this full time, but I'm still an electrician by day.
Have you checked out the new Netflix series?
The new Cyberpunk
Yeah,
series?
yeah, yeah.
No, I haven't yet. I want to. I need to. It's going to be on it's absolutely on my list. Just I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's on my list. I haven't checked it out. I watch a lot of stuff with my wife, and she's got this weird aversion to animated stuff, but we'll also watch all the animated stuff that is specifically for kids. Like the Disney movies and stuff like that. But once you step away from that, she's got this weird aversion to watching that stuff. And my daughter always calls it my baby shows. So
okay. Yeah. No.
yes, I get bullied in my own home all the time.
Yeah. I feel for you. No, I'm currently watching the Lord of the Rings,
Okay.
and catching up on The Boys. So,
Yeah.
but my I
Yeah,
don't know.
now it's rough, man. You got She-Hulk, Lord of the Rings, House of Dragons.
Yeah, I'm glad that there's a glut of content to
Yeah.
watch finally. I will get to it sometime later this year. Um, Unfortunately, as much as I tried to give up sleep, that was not a realistic proposition to maintaining yourself as a
You're a
writer.
faux vampire, not a true vampire.
Yeah, yeah, I'm waiting. Anybody who watches this late at night, if you happen to be a vampire, just find me.
Yeah.
But the yeah, no, I had to give up video games mostly, and I've given up a lot of, like, content, like, just consuming, because I'm always like, either doing my day job, I'm trying to, like, work out and have some fun and enjoy life,
Yeah.
or actually writing. And so that's kind of my metric, and
So
it's
do
like
you still
that.
get a chance to game?
No. I am I am the forever GM, and
Yeah.
with adult. Okay, the last time I got a chance to play in a game
Mm.
was over the pandemic,
Yeah.
when we were like, I got to play in a Legend of the Five Rings game, and it was a blast. That was it. Um it doesn't happen much anymore, because I had, for a brief moment of time, I had a Red Opera game at my house in person this summer
Uh,
for 2 players, by candlelight. We had the music, we were making all the food recipes. It was really, really fun. And then, of course, one person has to go back to the UK, another person's work schedule gets in the runs. And the I feel like
uh,
adult game scheduling for, like, tabletop is we all know it's its own meme, but
yeah.
that is the hardest monster to slay. Is the When can we find a time that we can all actually play on a recurring and regular basis for a fulfilling campaign? Um, and you need the right people with the right lineup and the right time, if you have that bandwidth.
It's hard. I saw the look on your face. You're like, I'm a game designer. I have to say I play games.
Yeah, yeah. Just like he's like, yeah, oh yeah, no, I love playing these things. No,
But
I
honestly,
wish I
that
could.
is like one of the most common things is like people get into game design and they're like, "Oh, I'll just be playing games all the time. It'll be my job." And then like you just don't, there just isn't enough time. And also there is also many of us that are doing, working and then doing this as well. So you're people are working two jobs and and trying to maintain a family in some cases, and like you said, other parts of your life. It is very challenging.
I have a very active imagination though, and that helps because one thing I can do is I can live vicariously sometimes. I'll be reading
Yeah.
something that somebody else has written, and I'll be like, I can imagine playing this. And like, having a scenario and that kind of helps. And, also writing novels is kind of like playing a game if you're insane enough because the characters live off in your own head and they will do things that deviate from your plot line. And so it's kind of like I'm storytelling for myself in my brain, even though my characters should do what my author brain tells them to do. Doesn't
Yeah.
work that way.
So, and Kelly 19 just ordered both books. So
Oh, sweet. Thank you so much, Kelly.
I will
19.
contest. I really enjoyed the first one, and I was complaining to Rick before we got started that I am terrible at reading books anymore, just for like reading's sake and enjoyment. And I keep thinking is like, I just got to start getting them and like schedule 30 minutes a day or something where I'm just gonna read, and make
Like
myself do it.
so that I think we were just talking about this right before this in the load
Yeah.
in. For me, what I started doing was um every time I travel now to a different convention, because I'm going around the country to all these different conventions now. Every time I get on a plane or I'm going somewhere, I purposely turn off all of my electronics and I just read physical novels in transit wherever I'm going. And that I have found has like gotten me back into that. Um, and I feel productive when I
Yeah.
get off the airplane. I don't feel like I was like, oh, what'd you do on the airplane? Oh, I watched two movies that I've already seen and ate bad airplane food. I'm like, no, man, I read a book. So
Are you a fast reader?
um, it depends. I actually say I'm probably mediocre. I love a trait that I happen to have where if I read a book, um, everything around me, everything that I see, the real world just fades away completely. And I am completely lost in the pages of a good book.
So you get
And
hyper focused.
yeah, so sometimes that means that I will move very slowly through, and other times it means I will look up and it's been 6 hours later.
Yeah, I feel like I do that as well. I also feel that's harder to do with audiobooks than actually reading, right? Because I've listened to a lot of audiobooks over the years as well, and they don't absorb the same way.
No, I agree. But that's also because when I'm doing novel reading, usually I'm listening to music and I got the
Okay.
book in my hand. I can feel the sensation. The page turn is kind of a thing, and just the words just disappear for me.
What do you
Um,
like to listen to while you read?
uh, Rammstein. Um,
Nice.
I'm a metal fan, so
Mm,
I will listen to folk metal, a lot of music. It's funny enough, a lot of the music I listen to, I can never understand the lyrics of.
yeah.
So, but the Wheel of Time was one of my favorite series, and to this day, there's a Rammstein song called "Tear," and it's track number 3. And for some reason, when I read the Wheel of Time series, my favorite character, Matt Cawthon, would always appear when Tear was playing from Rammstein on my CD player, even though that CD was just on repeat for hours on end.
Yeah.
So at this day, if I hear the song Tear, I think of Wheel of Time, Matt Cawthon, and they are inexorably linked. Um, but I will build for my own characters, in novels, I will build complete entire soundtracks from scratch for everybody. Music, I mean, and this is probably very evident with me doing the Red Opera or the Black Ballad. Music and writing and gaming are like to me synonymous. So I
Do you
can't write
use
without listening.
soundtracks when you run games?
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't one of the reasons I disliked running on Discord or online gaming is because my players necessarily couldn't listen to the same music that I could play when I was at home,
Yeah.
storytelling. I couldn't stream music decently enough on some of the online platforms. I found a way to make it work on Discord. Um,
Yeah, I mean, doesn't Roll20 have that built in?
it does now. I think when I was first dabbling with it,
Yeah.
it didn't. But soundtracks are absolutely a thing. I My Spotify playlist is ever increasing and growing, and it's funny is I you can tell that I may not get a chance to game much, but I still storytell a lot, or I
Yeah.
do a lot of one shots because I'll have these like Red Opera Killing Time, Sirens this, The Crow this, and like just all these session two, kids D&D group, and they'll
Oh,
have
so
all
you're
these.
playing, you're just not playing campaigns. It's
Right,
fine.
yeah. um so but that's soundtracks are life. What about you?
So we don't really anymore, but you back in the day we would always it's kind of weird. We would just play Anvil of Crom when combat broke out, and that's it. So
Okay. Hey,
mm,
I had a cheer when Stranger Things was on Netflix recently because Master of Puppets has been Metallica. That album
yeah,
has been a go-to album for badass epic combat
yeah.
scenes. Whether it was the original lyrics cover, the apocalyptica versions, the cello versions.
I have yet to
Uh,
find someone to agree with me, but I feel like it was a missed opportunity, and it should not have been Master of Puppets. It should have been Ride the Lightning.
oh, I'm gonna have to think about that.
Like,
I could see that.
because the thing is, like, people are like, well, the theme. I'm like, well, the theme of Master of Puppets is manipulation, and like nothing in that season was really about that either. So I don't even felt like it hit the theme right. But I just thought
Mm.
like for the scene, like Ride the Lightning would have been a better song.
They also could have done For Whom the Bell Tolls, but,
Uh,
with the whole clock tower,
oh yeah, yeah, that would have been good
the
as
the
well.
the countdown. Um, but alright. Anyway, yeah, so, I'll also, put in, I like running and playing a lot of Cyberpunk, right?
Okay.
And, so I have a very eclectic collection of Japanese, and French pop bands and, like EDM noirs and different styles. So,
I feel like I have an OSR Cyberpunk game sitting right next to me someplace.
oh man, mine's somewhere around here.
You know what? I gave up on Kickstarters and I don't back them hardly ever anymore, unless I'm just like, yeah, Neon Blood. I do because the problem is I'll back these cool Kickstarters, they show up, and then they end up in a pile someplace.
I have one book, mine, that I'm still waiting to run a group for. Um, is I backed the Judge Dredd Kickstarter.
Okay, yeah,
Um, and the world of 2080. Like I saw this thing, I loved it. I got to a chance to see like the sample of it,
yeah.
and I will this winter run somebody through some Dread.
This,
Like that is the or that kind of Dread, not the Tower Dread,
yeah,
the Judge
yeah.
Dread. I will absolutely pin down players if I can.
We've
I will
got
find a way.
some some music things in the chat here. And Kelly 19, folk metal, Corpicalani.
Corpiclani is one of my favorite folk metal bands. They are amazing. That song, Vodka and everything else that they have. Corpiclani and Alstorm and Iluvete
Yeah,
they what was so fun to them is going to concerts. And when you'd see them, the people that would go to folk metal shows were always so happy, and like they would get really into the music, but they would help each other out. Like everybody was there to just have a really good time. Whereas like Pantera shows, the metal fans were like just super angry and wanted to like beat people up. Um, so I've fallen really in love with folk metal. Plus, when they sing in Gaelic and they sing in all these different languages, I don't know what they're saying, which
yeah.
means their words never bleed into writing.
Yeah, I guess that's important as well. Also, they want to know if you have a have a link to your Spotify. I'm curious about some of your bands now.
I will have to see if I can fish that out sometime, and I will send it to you, but so you can post it. But
Or you put it on your social media.
yeah, that'll
Right.
work.
So
Um,
so Parks also, have you heard of Necro Goblicon? I heard they were
yes.
touring with Guar and wondering if they were any good. I actually like make a lot of the memes for our Facebook page, and like I've grabbed like Guar, Necro Goblicon because the lead singer dresses a goblin, so it's just like easy pickings. Alstorm,
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, they are absolutely fun. They're also great in person.
uh,
One of the things I'm really excited for, actually, and this is something that people will be able to see next year at cons, is so the heavy metal band Diamorte that I did the Red Opera with and we're doing the Black Ballad with. Obviously, they have these entire metal like albums with orchestras and like their singers, and they have opera singers. They are now a bunch of voice actors for like Doom, Dead by Daylight, and things like that as well. And they were also part of the Helsing concert in Germany. And there's a new game called Helsinger, that is like a shooter with like total metal, right?
okay.
Um, Next year we're starting to go to conventions where the band is going to perform the full Red Opera, like the actual like full concert stage act.
Oh wow.
In its like full metal incarnation, and I will be running like the Red Opera campaign one shots for people.
So they're clearly doing that for the love of the thing because there is not that much money in conventions. I feel like,
No, no, there's not. You go do shows and do your things, but I mean,
yeah,
we're the first one is in November in Chicago. So if you're in Chicago, V for Villains, and Diamorte and me, we're gonna be at like a concert venue tying music, gaming, and metal
that's super
all
cool.
together.
Too far away
I know, but we are going to hopefully find ways to like go on tour and do
and do
that
these
thing.
things. That is super cool. Rosewind is another band that I like, and also they're fun to meme because they look like dwarves. So
I'm not familiar with Rosewind, so that's one I'll have to
they're
check out.
literally a dwarf themed heavy metal band.
Oh my God! Hold on a second. I gotta look this up here. Just let me
Yeah,
put this in
yeah.
a.
And, search images first, and you'll see them. Like they do just look like dwarves. So,
All right, oh, they literally are dwarven metal. Like it says it right there. All
yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah. Just when you thought you couldn't get any more niche, something like that, dwarven metal pops up.
dude. So this is the thing, man. I would love to like find these bands and just
Yeah.
be like, hey, I would love to write a storyline based off of your album and like music, because you know these people are gamers, right? Like, let's do the thing.
There's
So
there's a there's a Gygax metal band.
that wouldn't surprise me. I
Yeah.
mean, the original pitch for working on the Red Opera to the band was like, we're in my kitchen, we're drinking mead, and I'm like, guys, the Venn diagram of people who like metal and people who like gaming is really just a circle at
Yeah.
this point. Um,
So when I was a kid, right, like you had all the different, all the different groups, and like the metal heads, a good portion of them, like you said, would play RPGs. Matter of fact, when we were talking to each other in public, we would use the code name Rocking Out for playing D&D that night or the weekend or whatever, so that the Muggles wouldn't know what we're talking about. Because back then it still was definitely not cool.
yeah. No, and there was definitely at one point in isolation, like Goss didn't necessarily play, you know, games until Vampire the Masquerade
Yeah,
thoroughly came out. Then everybody's probably played a rock paper scissors or rolled some dice, some d10s at
yeah.
some
Because I
point.
think you're more like '90s, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I'm more like '80s, so that makes sense. Like, goth came a little bit later.
yep. So, well,
Sure.
no, it started later, resurged, I guess. It started earlier, resurged. I don't know, because the goths were. I don't the whole musical subgenres and
Yeah.
their entomology and origins is a whole fascinating conversation. And if you say one wrong thing on like where music started at,
They're gonna come for you.
yeah, they're gonna come for you. And besides, it's cool anyway, because I mean, come on, The Cure, right?
Yeah,
The Cure is an
that's
iconic goth band,
that's
and they're from
true.
like, you know,
But
um,
they're almost like an island in the ocean, right? Compared to like later,
okay, sure, yeah,
and
that's true.
he's more of a standout. So have you checked out Morkborg? Because that also has that very heavy metal vibe to
Of
it.
course, my good friends over at Action Fiction Labs, Jerron Johnson, they do D&D parody type stuff,
Okay.
Monsters America. They are working on a Morkborg supplement. Um, and I think it's really freaking cool. Yorkborg, the like whole minimalistic Norwegian death metal RPG. It's fun because you can just have that thing in your slip bag, and you need to play in an airport and kill some players instantly in like a hour-long game session. You totally can. Um,
My a buddy of ours, Brian Colin, he fell in love with that game and decided to make his own game based off of it. But
Brian, he
instead,
does the creature collections,
yep,
right?
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, for sure. So, but instead of fantasy horror, it's more like sci-fi horror. And he's like, I was more into the punk scene, so it has more of that aesthetic to it. But like very much like designed in an homage to
If I
Morkborg.
could do a Bjorkborg style supplement or style thing, I
Yeah.
would love to do like a splatterpunk version
Okay.
of like you know either killer tomatoes from outer space and like or like chainsaw massacres and like 80s homage, Toxic Avenger splatterpunks, just
Well, I
blood,
mean, you
guts,
totally
gore.
could. You just have a lot of projects on your plate already.
That's true, that's true. uh but exciting ones. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
He
no,
he
I'm
decided to do that because he like it got him back into sculpting. Because during the pandemic, he's like, I'm running out of room. Like I make these big sculpts, I have no place to put them, and I can't sell them because I'm not going to shows. But he like sculpted, one of the creatures that they ended up basing the game off of,
oh,
which
that's
is
cool.
it is pretty cool. And also, so fun fact about you, because you're really into the music scene, that people might not know is like you're an electrician by day, but you also do like audio engineering or
Concert
work in
lighting.
shows. Yes.
Concert lighting. And so that's actually how I met a lot of these bands. Is I was doing just my day job as an electrician and just working venues at night at Chicago doing lighting for. I ended up working all variety of venues in Chicago, Aragon, the World Music Theater, Riviera Metro. But as time grew on, I kept working shows that or venues that just had more alternative or niche bands or like burlesque
Yeah.
shows and things like that. So I just kept meeting really interesting nightlife people. Um, I've played pool with Alstorm while one of them was dressed in a parrot suit, and there was,
Yeah.
you know, uh,
Mm.
there was like shenanigans in the background of this club with like Jello wrestling going on, and it's like
Mm.
this is a weird night. I don't know what I'm going to do with this night. Eventually it really helps with like strange background writing, because like those
Yeah.
weird experiences in life translate very well into something that you could like imaginative write in. I mean, that happens all the time to me. In my first book, there's a scene, and you probably remember this, but where there's this like plague demon that you're in the sewers, and you're the main character's down there, and this plague demon gets involved, and there's a lot of insects crawling all over him. That's based off a real life thing where I was in Chicago and I was down beneath the CTA tunnels in the deep tunnel projects in this neighborhood called Englewood. And I'm just going through, opening up closet door after closet door after closet door, checking to make sure everything works. And I get out of one tunnel and I crawl down to the next one. I open the door and I just feel this wave of water wash over me. And I'm just like, ah, crap. Shine
Yeah.
my flashlight down, and it's not water, it's a swarm of cockroaches that are crawling all over me. And I
Yeah.
start screaming like crazy. My foreman on a ladder 40 feet up is
Yeah.
laughing his ass off at this.
Mm.
I go running up there, have to like take my clothes off, drive home, like because you have to leave them because cockroach eggs. Just know, I get home, and that's when that chapter got written.
Yeah.
I was like, no, this is going somewhere.
In a previous life, I worked in a septic and drain business, but it was like commercial and light industrial,
Okay.
right? So like we would have to like go clean out the lines at Camden Energy, and you go up to the control room to check in or whatever, and it's just the monitors all over of the furnaces, and it's just like it looks like a scene out of in Dante's Inferno or Hellraiser or something. My buddy happened to be working at a turkey, one of the poultry plants where they process stuff, and like he was standing there, and the machine kicks on, and he just gets covered in turkey gore, and he's like, "Dave, I just got hit in the face with a freaking turkey beak."
Can I go home?
Yeah, like these are definitely jobs that make you cry as a grown
Yeah,
man.
when you
Mm.
fall backwards in
Oh,
a landfill into a pile of just like liquid slush,
yeah,
and you're like, you know what? I'm done for today. All right,
yeah. I've been harnessed and lowered down into like wet wells and pump stations, and you're like, it is definitely like a weird, bizarre thing. Like, and then and you probably had to do the same thing where you have to have confined space training. Uh,
that's the one thing I won't do. I am
uh,
in real life. I happen to be about 6'1", and I'm a
yeah.
very big guy. And I had to. They wanted me to go do confined space entry for this boiler work,
Uh,
and to get in there. And I took one look at that tiny door, and I was like, I am a 6'1",
yeah.
240-pound guy with broad shoulders, and I'm wearing Carhartts and like construction gear. And I'm like, you go find the short guy. I am not getting in that tank.
Well,
Uh,
I'm not very tall, but I am broad, and at my heaviest, like I'm not that far off from where you weigh. So but back then I was probably a bit lighter, but I did find out that um I can fit down 24-inch pipe, right? Like, because we're like at the end of the day, and they would only give us a place where we could get water on the other side of town, and there was just like a little bit of stuff left in the drain. For it was storm drain, and I was like, you know what? I think I can get it. And so I'm like with my arms above my head, like worming my way down, and then just using my hands to just like pull the stuff out.
Oh man. Yeah, no, no. That so like right there, that's like that would be inspiration for me to just go off and be like, okay, here's this D&D challenge, or here's this like game challenge. You have to do that shimmy, that horrible, like to
Yeah.
describe every bit of that like panic and that fear
Yeah,
or that
yeah. Or if something drops on
smell.
you and you're like that, there's like nothing you can do.
Right. You're just great. Great.
Yeah.
Um
I
but those scenarios though, I think they make for good storytellers as well. And like,
yeah.
when you've seen like different aspects of stuff like that.
There's been a couple like bear encounters when we go work like in the northwest of Jersey. It's kind of more mountainous. And like you'll see things that you're maybe not so used to seeing. Like a black bear just show up on your job site.
I didn't have any not I don't have that many encounters with critters other than cockroaches and rats, but all my work was in
Yeah.
Chicago. So, but I have a lot of like random things that you see in late night lifetime when you walk around a city at 2 o'clock in the morning. So,
I bet there's plenty of that. Yeah. So like before doing this full time, I worked in heavy construction and road work, so we'd be like all over the place. But also like you also work the third shift most of the time, so you also again see like all kinds of weird stuff. I know like so many accidents. There the one night they had a guy crashed his motorcycle in our site, and like one of the guys is like sitting there taking pictures of the guy. Like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, he doesn't care. His femur's sticking out of his leg right now. I'm the least of his worries. I'm just like,
Yeah, no, I mean, I've seen I've had very
uh,
similar scenarios to that where somebody's been, and I'm like, what? No, we have to deal with this thing. What's weird is one thing I picked up about myself, when I think about writing horror or even storytelling horror, for some reason, getting hurt never bothered me, or seeing people get hurt never bothered me. It's putting people back together
uh,
that was always like the trigger for me of like, okay, that's creepy. It's the resetting of things, or
yeah,
the healing part that was always worse. I don't know. So like, because I would see guys get injured on job sites, and I'm like, oh, you're injured, okay, here, maybe it's just because there's the stress reaction mode of just, let's be executive adult here and take care of this, wrap it up, get it
yeah,
ready to
yeah.
go. But then when the EMTs show up and they like do stuff to fix it, I'm like squeeing out in the
Okay.
distance, like running around,
But
pacing like a nervous bab.
that's because you had a chance to come down a little bit, right? And then
Yeah,
then you have to deal with the reality because you're not just reacting to what's going on anymore.
yeah. Oh yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
there's a OSHA there's an OSHA filmed video where I'm actually in the background after a job site injury. The guy is okay, but let's just say his hand got completely mangled on a wire reel. And in the background, you can actually see me in the video still
Uh,
running around, pacing back and forth, like,
yeah.
oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. Like just, and they're like, Rick, you were totally fine. And I'm like, yeah, but no, they're doing the thing.
Yeah, yeah. And you're not involved anymore. You don't have anything to do
Right.
but be, upset or nervous or anxious or
Yeah.
whatever. It's yeah. Humans are weird that way.
We are, or they are.
Yeah, yeah. So, so but like you said, it's plenty of fodder for writing, whether you're designing games, novels, or your campaign. It's you have a lot of this that you can kind of take into it
Yep.
for
Um,
sure.
and that's, Stephen King said it, write what you know, right?
Right.
And, take those elements, even if you're going to spin a bunch of fantasy to it, you know, the core plot beats, are still relatable to real life.
So, are you looking to at some point go full time doing this stuff, or I mean, I know you're an electrician and that's a really good job, so that would be very
Yeah.
hard to replace.
So that has something to do with it. My day job provides me a significant amount of inspiration, fun, and freedom to be creative in the way that I want to be creative. And I found a really good balance.
Yeah,
Although now that I've been doing more conventions and I've been traveling sort of around doing this, maybe in, a few years I might shift from like, hey, maybe I can just retire early if I can
yeah,
do this. But at the moment, no, my day job is cool because it gives me fuel. Like walking beneath the tunnels of O'Hare Airport recently in a job site walkthrough and hearing the drip in this tunnel a mile down with this really long, dark, giant steam pipes. And I'm like, man, imagine a freaking fight scene in here. So I don't know. It's being able to see a part of the world that most people don't, and then take that and run with it and just think it's cool. Um, I I like that part.
so what do you think so the Crow you said you're pretty much done with now, so what is the
Yes.
very next thing?
The next thing is the Black Ballad.
Okay.
We are with Storytellers Forge with the band Dia Morte. They're working on their album. We're working on principal writing, and I mean everybody that we've talked to about this. We're going to go to Kickstarter, I think, later, early February, maybe late January. But everybody's the idea of a cleric-focused book that tells this, awesome epic tale of what happens after you die, and you as players can determine the fate of like resurrection magic in the entire campaign world, because like
Yeah.
game systems where you can just revive, revivify, or raise dead and whatnot, death kind of becomes a joke. And so we have this whole storyline written around, hey, what happens with this, and
H-
actually like bring in clerics.
How involved is the band in the game side of things?
In the actual game side of things, not very much in terms of the storyline. Or so the band's role is they have their like stage presence and opera
Mhm.
act that they do. And so I take what they have already are doing on stage, take their core beats, and then expand those into the full chapters. And then the band are just big fans.
Yeah.
Like, you know, after the Red Opera, they're like, okay, Rick, you're officially the lore master for, Diamorte now at this point.
So did all
Um,
their albums essentially tell a story then?
Yes. Yeah, that's
Okay.
the whole point. They started off as an ensemble cast anyway of like, band members from like Black Crown Initiate, Cradle of Filth, these different, cast members. So every album they put out is like a sort of Coheed and Cambrian metal opera, right? There is a story, a tale, that happens between each of the songs. And we did the Red Opera and now the Black Ballad, a whole new album, whole new tale.
So what came first, like the concept, or where do you go and look at what they're doing, go, okay, I can turn this into a thing, or where is there a collab beforehand?
So in the case of the Red Opera, they already had the Red Opera out and they were trying to find a way to like get metal out there more
Yeah.
to people, right? And I was like, guys, you have an entire you have the Budapest Scoring Symphonic Orchestra. I could literally storytell to this. Your story is basically, and I just rattled off their story, and then I spun it in D&D terms about warlocks and
Oh.
things like that. They're like, holy crap! I'm like, I guess I'm writing a campaign. But for the Black Ballad, it's actually the other way around. The band is like working on their songs and their musics, and I'm the one who's more like, okay, here are plot beats that you want to like hit. And so the first time around, music influenced the writing. This time around, the writing's influencing the music.
Is this a partnership you guys want to continue with, or does it basically depend on how successful the next project is?
No, I think the world and the settings and the ideas that we have as like a think tank um, is always fun. I happen to really like playing off of these very poetic. Diamorte is very poetic and like flowery style with like Memento
Mhm.
Mori and this. They're definitely symphonic metal, right? It's very epic and
So
tragic.
the Red Opera, what was the theme for that? I know that you spun it into, oh, here's the story, and this could is how it could relate to D&D, but removing the D&D terms.
Removing the D&D terms, the theme of the Red Opera was love, how love can turn to murder.
Okay.
And because you have these you have the King Dorian and you have the Knight Captain of the Legionnaires and you have your love triangle with Fate, um and she gets caught up in her elements on stage and dies, and then these two guys, it's very Romeo and Juliet, Shakespearean like Hamlet kind of murder
Hmm.
goes. It was their original inspiration. So um they wanted to cross, to almost quote Drake, I wanted to take Legacy of Kain and cross it with Shakespeare.
So essentially, I could sum that up into one word, probably passion. Um, both like you're on the full spectrum of it.
Yep.
You're there. So what is the theme here for the next one
The next one is going to be acceptance.
then? Okay.
um, the idea that life is beautiful because death has an end to it, and it comes for everybody. And some people, in the band's operatic album, not D&D life, the idea is that people, those who have died choose to keep lingering on because they don't know how to let go. And so that's kind of the theme that I'm also now working with, on a gaming D&D aspect.
Were there any themes that got kind of got tossed because like the band wasn't feeling them, or they're like, I don't know how to turn this into an album?
No, I think the for both of these, for a long time now, we've kind of known which ones,
Mm.
what the overall idea of them is. Now the band has evolved since the Red Opera. They've gotten some pretty incredible cast members. Their skill has definitely leveled up. The composers that they're
Yeah.
working with are like just even more epic. And so there's a lot more nuance and a lot cooler stuff that they're doing. So we're really excited to we are as a group very excited for the release of the Black Ballad musical album. Just like even as game designers, writers, artists, layout and editor people, we're excited to take all of the stuff that we learned from, the first Red Opera and put that knowledge to use for, round two.
Did they feel like the original intent, the original purpose of getting metal out to more people via role playing games was successful, or was it that we did this thing and made it bigger than just just the music, and we really enjoyed it? Because RPGs are pretty niche.
They actually really enjoyed it that they've
Yeah,
made this thing. It wasn't so much like, hey, we're gonna they didn't feel like, oh, well, they definitely know that their music has gotten into the hands of more people. So that part
yeah,
was successful, right? Because people who have never heard of Dia Morte before have played the Red Opera.
yeah,
And but then now that it's out and it's like a physical thing that you can hold in hands, and the band is like, we have made this really awesome thing. Now let's go make an even different thing that they want to be a part of, because I'm
yeah.
also the primary driver in this of like, hey, I want to make the Black Ballad. Like I have reasons for wanting to make the Black Ballad, and I really like the idea, and I'm like, it's just in my brain, so it's going to hit the paper
Yeah,
regardless.
yeah. I just
And
wonder if they have a number in their mind, like the number of people that they want to reach in order to make it worthwhile. Like, because I guess like when I look at obviously RPGs are growing, right, and we're getting more and more people into the hobby, but it's still relatively small compared to most other hobbies.
I would say that RPG gaming is probably, bigger than a lot, like unless you're going to like a metal fest or something like that. Like
Yeah,
it's, you know, band numbers are, very small. Okay, so interesting, like independent content creator facts. Like when Scheiman and Schuster and all these people release their numbers for book sales, apparently if you sell more than a dozen books in your lifetime, congratulations, you're in the top 90th percentile of writers,
yeah,
right? Bands have the same thing. There is this huge, like, you are either known or you are not. And so even if it's a plus one person, you know, great. And like I said, the band has their own day jobs and their stuff. They are voice actors and they're graphic designers and musicians and composers. So this ensemble cast for Dia Morte, they're doing this out of passion, and that makes it really cool. Just like me with being able to be an electrician, they can make the kind of art that they want to make, not because they have to make it a success.
that makes a lot of sense. We are past the time, but I've enjoyed speaking with you. Final words before we head on out.
Um, Halloween is right around the corner, so make sure that you have your costumes ready. And if you want to find out more about what I'm doing, you can find me at rickheinzwrites.com or at crankybolt on any platform.
Yeah, links are down in the description so you can check out all that good stuff and follow Rick around the interwebs. And until next time, stay nerdy.